George Harrison never raised his voice. He rarely lashed out in interviews, and yet, beneath the calm and spiritual aura, he carried a quiet bitterness that grew darker over time. It wasn't loud, it wasn't public, but it was real and deeply personal. Known to the press as the quiet Beatle, Harrison's silence was often mistaken for serenity, when in truth it concealed years of resentment. His early experiences in the band left him feeling sidelined, creatively stifled and frustrated. Over time, this quiet bitterness shaped both his music and his relationships within the Beatles. Early encounters in Liverpool. In the early 1960s, George Harrison was a teenager riding a school bus in Liverpool when he met Paul McCartney. They bonded over music, sharing chords, records, and a love of skiffle and early rock and roll. McCartney, older and confident, naturally assumed a guiding role, while Harrison, quiet and impressionable, admired his assertiveness. Their friendship deepened, leading Harrison to join John Lennon's group, the Quarrymen, in 1958 at just 15. Lennon initially thought Harrison was too young, but McCartney arranged a second audition. Harrison impressed Lennon with his guitar skills, playing the lead line from Raunchy, a moment that set him on the path to rock history. Stepping into someone else's story. From the start, Harrison entered a band defined by Lennon and McCartney. The Lennon-McCartney songwriting partnership dominated the Beatles' identity, crafting the vision and creative direction. Harrison followed, absorbed, and learned, often content for a time to play a supporting role. But as fame escalated, so did his awareness of being sidelined. His ideas were often overlooked, guitar arrangements second-guessed, and songs passed over. Even in moments of success, Harrison struggled to assert himself. The quiet admiration he initially felt for Lennon and McCartney slowly began to mix with frustration, laying the foundation for a simmering tension that would eventually shape his artistic choices. The quiet underdog Harrison earned the nickname the Quiet Beatle, partly thanks to the press romanticising his introversion. But to those close to him, it was something heavier. He was beginning to feel suffocated, creatively and personally, as McCartney and Lennon dominated the studio. Harrison had musical ideas and spiritual awakenings he wanted to express, yet his voice often felt drowned out. Paul's perfectionism and controlling tendencies contributed to this tension. Harrison later admitted that years of subtle undermining had affected him deeply, particularly in his guitar playing. The admiration he once held for his bandmates had started to warp into quiet resentment, a feeling he carried privately for years. Breaking point in the studio. By 1968, during the White Album sessions, Harrison had grown confident as a songwriter, ready to contribute more fully. Yet the studio atmosphere remained tense. Paul McCartney had assumed a de facto leadership role, directing sessions with precision, while John Lennon grew increasingly distracted by his personal life. Harrison, no longer willing to be overlooked, began to assert himself. The Let It Be sessions in early 1969 exposed cracks that had long been building. One notable moment occurred during rehearsals for Two of Us, when Harrison calmly but firmly challenged Paul's direction. His words were measured but resolute, a signal he had reached the limit of his patience. A temporary exit. On January 10th, 1969, frustrated by creative suppression, Harrison temporarily quit the Beatles. The tension in the studio had become unbearable. engineer Glyn Johns described the atmosphere as unpleasant, with collaboration replaced by subtle hostility. Harrison's exit was not dramatic or confrontational, but it was a statement. He needed space to reclaim his creative voice. Paul, focused on maintaining the band's vision, did not fully grasp the impact of his controlling tendencies on Harrison. For George, the quit was a necessary assertion of self-respect, a moment where the quiet underdog refused to be overshadowed any longer. His departure marked a turning point in both his music and his emotional life. Creative triumphs. Alone, Harrison returned to the band under new terms and soon began writing songs that showcased his growing confidence. Tracks like Something and Here Comes the Sun demonstrated the artistry he had been developing for years, often overshadowed during earlier sessions. These masterpieces were proof of what Harrison could achieve when left to work in his own space. Yet, the damage to his relationships within the band was irreversible. The rift with Paul McCartney had widened into a permanent strain. While Harrison remained in the group, a part of him had already emotionally detached, signalling a shift from collaboration to quiet independence. The breakup and its personal impact. The Beatles officially disbanded in 1970. For Harrison, the split was both professional and deeply personal. While the media focused on the feud between Lennon and McCartney, Harrison was quietly cutting ties, especially with Paul. Publicly polite interviews and staged reunions masked the lingering resentment. Harrison channeled his frustrations into his solo work, notably with the 1971 album All Things Must Pass. The album, a creative and commercial triumph, included tracks originally rejected by the Beatles, showcasing his musical depth. Harrison's work expressed the silent bitterness he carried, particularly toward Paul, reflecting years of frustration in a subtle but unmistakable way. Musical retaliation and reflection songs, like Wah Wah from All Things Must Pass, contained lyrical jabs at McCartney's controlling behaviour, couched in musical brilliance. Later, in 1973, Harrison released Sue Me, Sue You Blues, addressing the legal battles following the Beatles' breakup. Though ostensibly about the group as a whole, the song clearly conveyed his anger toward Paul, whose lawsuit to dissolve the partnership felt like betrayal. Harrison's ex-wife, Pattie Boyd, noted his dry, reflective tone in interviews. He rarely romanticized the past, choosing instead to present his version of events with calm honesty. His commentary revealed both pain and ironic wit, maintaining his characteristic quiet rebellion, reunion, and lingering tension. In 1994, Harrison reunited with Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr for the Beatles Anthology project. Fans saw healing and nostalgia, but behind the scenes, old dynamics quickly resurfaced. Harrison bristled under Paul's direction, rolling his eyes whenever the former Beatle attempted to dominate the studio. Producer Jeff Lynne, who had worked with Harrison in the Travelling Wilburys, noted that the same controlling tendencies persisted. While Paul later admitted that old patterns never fully disappeared, Harrison's responses suggested lingering frustration. The reunion was polite, professional, and collaborative, but the quiet tension reminded everyone that some relationships, even between friends and collaborators, cannot easily be erased. Harrison's final years. By 1997, Harrison was diagnosed with throat cancer. He initially responded to treatment, but the illness returned, spread into his lungs and brain. In his final years, he lived away from the public eye, spending time with his wife Olivia and son Darnie at Friar Park, a sprawling Victorian estate in Henley-on-Thames. Despite declining health, Harrison's wit and philosophical outlook remained sharp. During a 2001 Yahoo online chat, when asked about Paul, he quoted a Victorian proverb: "Scan not a friend with a microscopic glass. You know his faults, then let his foibles pass." Even in reflection, Harrison's words balanced elegance with subtle pointedness. Final encounters and legacy. Harrison's final meetings with old friends included Paul McCartney. Their last moments together were quiet and personal, far removed from the tension of their youth. Paul described sitting with George, holding hands and sharing jokes, a moment of intimacy and reconciliation. Harrison passed away on November 29, 2001, at a friend's home in Los Angeles, surrounded by loved ones. His final words, according to Olivia, were simple: love one another. Even in death, the complexities of his relationships lingered, reflecting a life lived with both devotion and quiet struggle. Harrison left behind music, spiritual insight, and an enduring example of silent resilience, the silent rebellion. George Harrison's life was defined by contrasts: quiet yet intense, spiritual yet frustrated, loyal yet independent. Within the Beatles, he carried a private bitterness, especially toward Paul McCartney, that never fully disappeared. Yet he transformed that tension into profound music, demonstrating both skill and emotional depth. Harrison was never the loudest Beatle, but his silence carried meaning. Through decades of collaboration, conflict, and solo achievement, he proved that restraint can be powerful and that even unspoken struggles can shape a legacy. George Harrison remains a testament to the quiet strength of the artist, overlooked, underestimated, but ultimately unforgettable.